Welcome back, everyone, to the W Sports Podcast. Jimothy, Tubby are back at it again today for a special MLB trade deadline video, and you don't want to miss it. So, Tubby, welcome back to the show. I know it's been a minute, man.
It's been a little bit, but hey, it's given us time to kind of dive into a few things and have some stuff on tap to talk later this week. But now it's time to talk about some baseball trades.
That's very true. So today's episode is specifically going to be for the MLB trade deadline. I mean, we didn't get to record this weekend because of some scheduling issues and just traveling for Tubby with just doing what he does. So here we are today doing a special quick episode. And then, yeah, we'll be back on Sunday, though, bringing you all the news and updates because college football is just around the corner. We are officially, I mean, by literally the day after tomorrow, we can say football is this month. And that's an exciting time to
Uh,
be around. So,
we got a Hall of Fame game Thursday.
oh, I didn't realize it was this Thursday. I thought it was next week. Okay, so yeah,
No,
it's literally this week. That's
yeah,
pretty exciting. So, if you came here looking for football, don't worry, it is happening at this weekend's episode, and you better believe we're heading into season 4 of the W Sports
yes, sir.
Podcast. We're 3 years old, man. What in the world?
I know we're almost in kindergarten.
We're almost there. Yeah, maybe we are pretty advanced. Maybe you could say we are in kindergarten already. Maybe we should
I
be.
mean, we're smart enough. I mean, might as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead. We're going to dive in because we're going to hit it running today with some of these trade deadlines and big picture thoughts. And if anybody is watching this right now, please put your comments in there so we can know what you think, what you thought of your team, what you were upset with your team for, anything like that. We'll make sure we bring it up if you put that in the chat. But Tubby, give me what's your overall. I need to know what's your theme or feeling from this year's trade deadline. Is there any word or phrase that you'd use to describe it?
I think it was interesting. It's kind of like a common term, but it was we all expected the big name like Garrett Crochet to get traded. Didn't happen.
It's
It
too
kind of
pricey.
sounds like and then like the sounds like he kind of tanked everything with his comment saying, "Oh, if you want me to pitch in the postseason, you have to give me an extension now." Well, teams are like, "Well, you're under control for 2 years. Why would we go ahead and give you an extension now?"
Yeah.
And so I think it was interesting because you took off the biggest pitcher, trade piece out there,
Hmm.
and so it kind of left you left some teams kind of scrambling. How are we going to go approach this, you know, trade deadline? Because you had the Orioles and you had the Yankees, you had the Dodgers, maybe a couple other teams that were really interested in Garrett Crochet. Now having to try to find options other places, and then on top of that, something we talked about a couple weeks ago is like there's so many teams that are still somewhat in the hunt, so there's not really going to be a whole lot of selling teams.
Hmm.
There's going to be more teams actually buy than we would think that maybe they shouldn't, because they may be in the hunt for the playoffs but probably aren't going to really matter much in the playoffs. But there's so many teams still in contention that there was really only like a handful of teams that were like, yeah, that team is definitely going to sell. But I think the teams that missed out on selling
Hmm.
the pitching market, with how much of a seller's market it was, really messed up. You got teams like the Cubs. You should have traded Jameson Taillon. The Angels definitely should have traded Tyler Anderson.
Hmm.
The Giants, a team that was like kind of like in this weird limbo where they traded Jorge Soler, so you expected, okay, maybe they're going to trade, and they're going to be sellers and not going to be buyers, even though
Hmm.
they're somewhat close to that final wild card spot. But then they go and trade for Mark Canna, but keep Blake Snell, who could be a free agent after this year, and you thought maybe they would trade him. So I think teams that kept their starters, but they probably should have,
Hmm.
definitely missed out, because the price that these teams were willing to trade for starting pitching was pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I mean there were. I would say if I'm going to put a word or phrase on it, it was just kind of role playery. Right? This isn't you didn't have
Yeah.
the Juan Sotos, you didn't have like you said, Crochet wasn't going to get traded. There's so many of these big names that didn't get traded that it's felt like the last 4 years we've seen those massive names get
Hmm.
moved, and we just didn't this year. So honestly, a little bit of a letdown overall, mostly because the Cardinals for me were just too good to. Unfortunately, to trade away some of the big names that could have been on the market and may have
Hmm.
gotten a decent return with position players. It's always a gamble because the market's limited, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It just felt limiting overall. And here's my question: is because of what you said, there's so many teams into it. The MLB is not going to do this. They're probably going to keep the trade deadline here. But what if they pushed it 2 more weeks? Would that give teams enough time? 45-ish games left in the season instead of 60 or 55
Hmm.
to 60. Do you think that is enough to really, with the expanded playoffs, to really help teams know, we're sellers. We should not be buying. We shouldn't be standing pat and seeing what happens. Buyers,
Hmm.
sellers. Like, would that work?
Yeah, I think that's actually a very interesting, thought process. I think it'd be really good. I think it would help these teams. They go, okay, we know for sure we're not going to be able to make it, so we need to sell now,
Hmm.
and or we're not going to be, competitive in the playoffs, so we should probably sell. And it gives these teams because the way it is right now is what 10 days after the All-Star break,
Hmm.
teams are still trying to get into that flow of coming back from the All-Star break, so you don't really quite know if you're, you know, just on a bad streak because you've been away from baseball for a week,
Hmm.
or is it, we're just in that spot where we can't get traction and we just need to go ahead and, sell. So I think that would be a very interesting, maybe push it just maybe another week at least, push it a little bit more. I think would be a very smart, idea because yeah, it would give these teams a little bit more of a process of going, okay, we don't think that we can compete, so might as well
Yeah.
trade. And I mean, like I said, a lot of these teams bought when
Hmm.
they're kind of like, well, we have a chance at the playoffs. We could be
Yeah.
dangerous, if we make it. And I absolutely love that the Royals were a team that, we're like, hey, why not?
Yeah.
We're in that hunt for the
Yeah.
wild card spot. Let's go ahead and maybe we can do something like what the Orioles did last year, where we're this young team, and yeah, maybe we don't think we can win it, but at least be competitive. So it sets us up for the year after to where maybe we could be really competitive, going out and getting a guy like Michael Lorenzen, who has pitched good this year, pitched good last year, and has shown ability to be a good fourth, fifth starter in a rotation. Go out and get some bullpen help that they drastically needed, and go get a guy like Paul DeYoung, who he
Hmm.
can play every once in a while. He has 18 home runs this year, give you a little bit more bop in that lineup behind guys like Salvi and Pascantino and Bobby Witt. I like that they were aggressive because they had seen that. I mean, they had been one of the better teams since the All-Star break. That they were starting to catch. The Cleveland Guardians were kind of a little struggle there for a second,
Hmm.
but they're still in the lead. But I think that they're like, hey, we can win this. Potentially win a wild card spot and maybe make some noise with this young team because we got nothing to lose at this point. We can go out there if we can steal a series or two. Hey, it gives us more motivation for next year and builds us up for the
Yeah.
future. So I like that a young team like that who has surprised teams this year is buying and hey, let's see if we can't make a small run.
Yeah. Yeah. Any team out there that didn't sell that you feel like, what, they really should have sold? Um,
I think that the Angels, it's a team that we look at every single year where they do this weird thing at the deadline, like last year when they bought, and then like 15 days later they cut everyone.
get them all out of here.
Yeah, so you had guys like Tyler Anderson who has a 2.9 ERA this year that you could trade, and we saw the pitcher market. We saw what the Astros had to give up for Kikuchi, who has
Hmm.
a 4.65 ERA this year and has looked really bad. They gave up one of their top pitching prospects, a top outfield prospect, and a mid-level infield prospect. You could have got quite a bit for
Hmm.
Tyler Anderson. Luis Rodifo. I mean, there's a lot of teams calling about him. A guy hitting over 300 and play multiple positions in the infield. And Wells, an outfielder that who
Yep.
a lot of teams were calling about also, who need outfield help, and you didn't. I mean, yeah, you traded uh, Estevez and Garcia, your relief pitchers, but you didn't trade your bigger pieces because, I mean, you got a great return back for Estevez. To me, if I was that GM, I would have been like, okay, I got this for a relief pitcher. What can I get for a starting pitcher? What can I get for a Nufo? What can I get for these guys? And maybe try to build up your farm system that is pretty poor right now.
No, I
Because
mean, it's
last year,
terrible.
yeah, last year you traded two of your top prospects for guys that you ended up cutting 2 weeks later. So
Yeah.
I don't understand why you didn't sell, because you had a chance right now. Like I said, you were one of those few teams that
Yeah.
probably that should have sold, but you didn't.
Yeah. Some of these, there were a few big names, and I think part of I mentioned that there wasn't really that year because these big names really weren't having huge years. Kikuchi was one of
Yeah.
those that you mentioned. I'm glad you mentioned that. Randy Rosarena, he moved teams all the way across I mean, you can't go any
Yeah.
further across the country. They did that. We've talked so much about how the Mariners, we want them so bad to be the team that knocks down the Astros, but their biggest thing is offense, is
Yeah.
getting this Randy Rosarena, fresh face, new place. Is this going to be, this is one of the steps that they took? Is this the right one?
I think it very well could be. I think that maybe he just, I mean, we always see players that go, okay, they just needed a change, scenery, can really rejuvenate them. And he's played good so far. It's his short sample size, but
Yeah.
he's played good so far, and he brings an energy to your locker room, and it seems like he's got that energy back. That was one thing I've noticed. Whenever he was with the Rays early on this year, that energy from him was off.
Yeah.
For a guy that has this high energy and is like always, moving, dancing, just has this energy in the dugout that kind of resonates throughout the team, wasn't quite there. And so maybe it made me think that maybe there's something going on that within the organization where he just wasn't quite happy there. So maybe this will be a little bit of rejuvenation for him, because we know what he can do. When he's good, he's good. And so
Yeah.
I think that maybe he can get things going and help bring something to that offense. But they needed a lot more help than just Randy Rosarena. I mean, they did go get Justin Turner, but Justin Turner's 40 years old. He hasn't had a great year this year for the Blue Jays. Maybe same thing for him.
Yeah.
Put him in a different situation.
Yeah. Well, how about this? We can, at the end of this, I wanted to ask you who the two teams that won the most, but we're going to go through a list. I'm going to go some rapid fire, and you say, yeah, that one. Let's talk about that one real quick, okay? And this is just some of the names that are traded, not necessarily the prospects. So we can always dive into that if you want to choose that. But we got Philadelphia, Gregory Soto going to Baltimore, so Baltimore bolstering the bullpen. Not only that, we had Sir Anthony Dominguez, same thing. That right there. So you didn't even say this. I want to ask this question. It's the World Series. It's the bullpen versus Baltimore. If Philly gets there against Baltimore, who is more upset with this trade in the end? Like, who is it more likely to bite them in the butt?
Well, Baltimore.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of Sir Anthony Dominguez. Not really big on Gregory Soto.
Okay.
I mean, the Phillies. If we're just going bullpen for bullpen, the Phillies have one of the deepest bullpens in baseball.
Yes. That's why they had this.
Yeah.
Move. I'm just picturing it right now. Sir Anthony Dominguez comes in, pitches against Bryce Harper in the 7th inning in a tie. I mean, boom. And like you said, yeah. So we'll see that. Dylan Floro to Arizona. So they're trying to bolster a little bit there. Mark Canha to San Francisco. San Francisco's buying and selling in weird spots to me. I don't know. I don't get it. Dylan Carlson is finally gone. Former number 1 prospect for the Cardinals, goes to Tampa Bay for nothing. I mean, a reliever, but nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
All right. So you haven't said pause yet. I'm pausing on this one again.
Okay.
Cardinals didn't get Juan Soto because of him.
I know, right?
It's just the stupidest John Mozeliak decision I think I've ever heard was, we can't get rid of Dylan Carlson. Yeah, Juan Soto's decent, but
yeah. I was looking at that one a couple years later. You're like, man, I really messed up.
It's literally 2 years, not even that long. I mean, it's insane. Luis Garcia, one of the few pieces the Angels did send out to Boston. Martin Perez, Pittsburgh sends him to San Diego. San Diego was on the move a ton.
Yeah.
Your Dodgers as well. I think that was the thing. Is like the two teams were kept like punch for punch. So you tell me, we're going to hit
Mhm.
pause here because the Dodgers had quite a few moves here. Jack Flaherty, Kevin Kiermaier, Tommy Edmond from the
Mhm.
Cardinals, who isn't healthy yet, but he can be a super utility role.
Mhm.
Give me the breakdown between the Padres and the Dodgers as you see it.
Yeah, so the Padres at the beginning of the year they had one of the worst bullpens in baseball. The only guy they had was Robert Suarez who could get any outs. They went out and added two of possibly the best relief pitchers on the market, and Scott and the guy from the Rays. I can't name just slipped my mind, but
Isaac
Dodgers.
Paredes?
No, Paredes went to the Cubs.
Oh, he
They
did.
they got a relief pitcher from
Oh,
the
okay.
Rays. I can't remember his name, but the Dodgers they needed a starting pitcher, and I honestly wasn't sure if they were going to trade for one. I was hoping it was going to be Jack Flaherty because I think that at least I've seen him pitch over the last couple of years more than 12 innings compared to Garrett Crochet, who this is the most innings he's pitched in 60 over 60 more innings than he's ever
Hmm.
pitched in a single season. I had some
No worries.
some reservations about that. I love that Tommy Edman, if he get healthy, I think it's something the Dodgers really could utilize. We've seen him do it quite a bit with a super utility player. I I think that they both did a lot what they needed to do, but I think my biggest worry for the Padres is still about that rotation. We don't know if Yu Darvish is going to pitch again this year. Musgrove just gets hurt again with another elbow injury. Yeah, is he going to pitch again this year? So
Hmm.
yeah, Cease pitches a no hitter. King's pitch solid, but outside of that, who are your other starters that are really going to give you a chance in the playoffs in a 7-game series?
Hmm.
There's only so much you can pitch that bullpen. So I think that they still have some big holes there. And the fact that they gave up their number 2, 4, and 5 prospects for a relief for a closing pitcher who is a free agent after this year,
Yeah, that's too much.
I think was. I mean, it's a typical Padres thing.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I mean, are you surprised by anything else if it's the Padres?
No?
Yeah. I mean, you look at that. So, let's look at some of the teams that were fringe teams that actually did a lot more than maybe what you thought. Is there a team that
Mm-hmm.
sticks out to you in that regard?
Mm.
They went out there, made some deals. They actually bought instead of standing pat or sold.
I think the Cardinals. I actually liked what the Cardinals did. We've seen
The
Eric
pieces
Petty.
they moved from,
Yes,
absolutely.
and I think Eric Petty was probably one of those pitchers that if since Crochet wasn't going to get traded, the Cardinals were smart that they moved on him earlier, a day or so
Hmm.
early, because that price probably would have went up a whole lot more. And he has reinvented himself as a pitcher, got rid of a curveball, added a sweeper, and the sweeper has been absolutely deadly. I mean, a
Yeah.
3.11 ERA this year. I think he's probably. I would have much rather the Dodgers traded for Fetty than Crochet, but the Cardinals, if you look at it, all they gave up in that trade was Tommy Edman. The
Hmm.
Dodgers gave up all the prospects
Yep.
to the White Sox. So
It's
really,
weird how those work.
you got Eric Petty, who's one of the better pitchers in the AL this year. Tommy Pham, who's a rental. I mean, but he can still put the bat the ball. He's
I
had,
think you could re-sign him too. I think he's going to
yeah,
be easy to re-sign
mm-hmm.
wherever he
Yeah,
goes.
and he is a solid season. Not going to be anything you're going to go right home about, but someone that can play good, and he's a right-handed bat with some power that the Cardinals have desperately needed with Goldschmidt and Arenado not really showing any power from that right side. So
Bro.
I think that they did a great job, really not giving up anything except for Tommy Edman, who me and you talked
And
about
play.
this. We expected him. He was probably going to get traded because there's just really nowhere to play him. And
Yeah.
so really you don't give up anything. You let the Dodgers send the prospects to the White Sox. And honestly, the White Sox got ripped in this trade because now you look at the the pitcher market and what teams were giving up for
Hmm.
starting pitchers. You get a Miguel Vargas, who I think we know who he is.
Yeah.
A 230 hitter that maybe has a little bit more power than he showed. A couple
230.
prospects that are like 17 years old who are not even in the top 30 in the Dodgers minor league system. So that if they waited a day or two, they probably get way more for him.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think the Cardinals did great, and they have shown a little bit more fight over the last month and a half than I think we expected, and
yeah,
have put a little bit more in there where maybe they do make the playoffs. And yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
I'm
I
not
don't
gonna
know.
buy it right now. They've lost 3 straight game ones or four
Yeah.
straight game ones in series, and then they've just not had the oomph. They figured it out when they put Paul Goldschmidt at 7th in the lineup and
Mm-hmm.
Nolan Arenado at like 6th, and they do it for like 2 games. They sneak him back up. But real quick, Ricky, appreciate you jumping in the chat, man. Thank you for subbing to the show. Always appreciate that, man. He said best podcast is what his. It's what he said. That's what they're saying. That's what they're
I
saying.
mean, it's what the people are saying.
Yeah. So I was happy. Tommy Edman. I told you. I said
Mm-hmm.
he's a tier down
Yeah.
from Brandon Donovan, but both of them are very very good at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
The Dylan Carlson, it was time. We got to move on from the Juan Soto business.
Yeah.
But the fact that they still have Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado to me is just it's frustrating because you tell me this, and I'm looking at this team that just doesn't have it. They don't have it. They don't have that fire for whatever reason. So I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I hope I'm wrong.
But
But
if we're, but the thing is though, you even if we're not just looking at it right now, for this season, Fetty signed for a couple of years,
this is
so
true.
you got him on a really good contract.
Good deal.
Like
Yeah.
you said, you re-signed Tommy Pham, probably pretty easy if you wanted to, and you gave up one guy, Brendan
Yeah.
Donovan, not Brendan, Tommy Edman, who hasn't played a single inning for you in the major leagues this year. So really, you didn't give up a whole lot. And offseason, if you want to trade Goldschmidt and you want to trade Arenado, you can, because yeah, maybe you could have got a little bit more for him at the trade deadline. But like you said, position players you don't quite get as much for at the trade deadline as you would a starting pitcher, unless it's this just Juan Soto or some big name player, Trey Turner, someone all-star caliber, which they're not quite there anymore. I can
True.
see why they didn't, and you probably get a little bit more for him in the offseason, possibly for a team that's going, okay, I need a third baseman, I need a first baseman with veteran ties. So I get
Yeah.
that. I think the Mets were another team that kind of made a few trades where they may not have been these big name trades, but go out and get a few pitchers here and there that give you a little bit more depth in your rotation and into your bullpen for an offense that has been really good of late,
Mm-hmm.
and a team that could potentially end up knocking the Braves out of the playoffs.
It's very true. So let's go through this real quick. You can tell me yes or no. Like yes, they did enough. No, they didn't do enough. We're gonna go with not the division leaders, but I want to talk about making a deep
Mm-hmm.
playoff run. Did they do enough to put themselves in position? So we're gonna go through a couple second and third place teams and divisions. Just want to hear what you got your takes on it, Tubby. So we're gonna start off with the Pittsburgh Pirates.
No, I don't think they have enough there. I like what they did. I like the Brian Deli Cruz.
I love that trade.
I like Nick York, who could be a potential good second baseman at some point, but I don't think he's quite ready. I just don't know if there's enough there for them right now to make a push.
Okay. How about Atlanta Braves?
No, they have too many injuries.
Too many. Yeah, the Ozzy Albies ones, we didn't even get to talk about that. That's brutal.
No.
Then they bring in Whit Merrifield, I believe Whit Merrifield, and then he gets hurt. So, oof.
Yeah.
All right, you already talked about the Mets, so we're going to move on. Padres, we've talked about. What about the Diamondbacks?
I liked a lot what the Diamondbacks did.
Yeah.
They went and got a left-handed bullpen arm that they needed, AJ Puck, who is a much better relief pitcher than he is a starting pitcher. You go get Dylan Floro also, who I think is a really underrated, relief pitcher. And Walker gets hurt last night. You go out and, yeah, we're not the biggest fans of Josh Bell, but I think for a short period of time, he's on his hot streak right now. So you got to, attack while you can, for a couple weeks until Walker's healthy. I think it's a great replacement for a team that's starting to get hot right now.
Yeah. How about Boston Red Sox or New York Yankees?
I don't think the Yankees did enough. There's rotation. Garrett Cole gets scratched today because body fatigue. That worries me a lot. I don't think that the rotation's strong enough for the postseason. He went and got a couple bullpen arms. Jazz Chisholm, yeah. How long will the honeymoon last? Yeah, he's had a couple of really good games for you. Red Sox, I like some of the moves they made. Going with a couple of bullpen guys. The but I don't know if they really made enough to make a strong push.
There's one more team, but real quick on the Yankees, I do like Jazz Chisholm there. I think it could work out. We'll just see if he stays healthy. That's always the big if.
Hmm.
And for Red Sox fans, at least they did something like
Yeah.
productive. This team has just not done anything productive. It feels like the last couple of years. And Josh Bell, this might as well be the annual Josh Bell trade day because he always gets traded and
Yeah.
every year, man. Ever
Yep.
since he left the Pirates. All right, so the last team, Minnesota Twins.
No.
Yeah. All right.
I think the Royals did way more than they did, and they're in third
Agreed.
place. And I like I said, I think the Royals probably came out the best out of any team because the way that they attacked the market early, like I said, early before the trade deadline.
Yeah.
They did this last year too with the Aroldis Chapman. Both of us were like, "Oh, what are they doing?" They traded Aroldis Chapman before the trade deadline. Well, that player ends up being Cole Reagans, who's
Yeah.
one of their it was
One
an
of the
all-star
aces.
pitcher.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they knew what they were doing and did it again this year. And
Yeah.
I think maybe more teams might start looking at this because they didn't have to give up as much for Lorenzen as they probably would have today if Lorenzen was traded to the Royals. So go out and got bullpen help that they absolutely needed. Got you another starting pitcher who now will push Marsh to the bullpen to help out that bullpen more. And you get a veteran guy that can play, second, short, third, even first base in the infield, maybe some outfield if you need to, who has a really good power bat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I can't agree more. I love it. So, Tubby, I want to say thank you so much, man, for just getting us set up with show notes, just ready for this impromptu trade deadline podcast, guys. What Tubby brings to this show is knowledge, his passion. It's second to none. So I'm just grateful to be a part of it, man. Thank you so
I
much for what you
appreciate
do.
it. I appreciate days like this. I love days, trade deadlines,
It's a
drafts,
great day.
because it gives me a chance to do what I love the most, and it's evaluate players.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I'm sure here's what I'd say is if you follow us anywhere on social media or on YouTube, why don't you go ahead and message Tubby about the prospect ideas? Because we didn't get a chance because that's so deep and
yeah,
in the weeds of baseball if we get into that. But I promise you, Tubby will have a great take on those. And he's got perspective too. So make sure you do that. And if you have not already, please subscribe to the show wherever it is that you're consuming it. That's the easiest way to support the show. And we greatly appreciate every single one of you. We're on the journey on YouTube to get to 300 subscribers, and we would love you to be a part of it if you're not already. So please hit that subscribe button, and we'd love you to be in the chat with us every single Sunday, normally at 6:30 Central Time, so we can just jump back in there and talk all things. And with football coming around the corner, literally this week, there's no better time than right now to join the W Squad and just be a part of the community, man, because you just got to listen. So, all right. Nothing else to say. We're speechless. All right. Well, until then, we'll see y'all next week.
see you.
See ya.